This is Ivy Unleashed,
a Gold Ivy production.
Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. We are so excited you're tuning in today. We have a treat for you. We are talking about the simplest thing and the most powerful thing, the power of your breath, and why most of us have been breathing the wrong way.
Who knew? So that's why we brought on Kerry Lipanot. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Yes, it's really cute how we met. We met at a park because our cute little sons who are 7 were in class in first grade together last year, and they really wanted to have their moms write a note to each other with their phone numbers so they could have a play date.
It was so sweet.
So our kids set us up on a blind date. We meet at this park, not knowing who we're going to meet. We find out we grew up like 40 minutes apart from each other. Yeah. And Carrie's brilliant. And we got talking about all kinds of things. And so let's talk about, first of all, what you do. What is your profession and what do you do?
Long story. All right. So I am a speech language pathologist, which means a lot of things. I work with babies through adults. I can work with swallowing, speech production, language, cognitive function. Oh my goodness, so many other things I'm sure that I'm missing. On the daily for me, I have kind of been trained pediatrics, but now I've been getting into working with adults as well. And that's been kind of a fun passion for me because I can relate to them very much. So as we'll get into later. But I have recently trained into something called Orofacial Myofunctional therapy, which is why we are here today.
Yes.
So we've been obsessed with this idea of the power of the breath because of my journey with my health, and the gut-brain axis is kind of how it started. And then we learned about the book Breath by James Nestor.
Yes.
And we wanted to talk about this so bad. And serendipity, Andrea met Kerry, told her about her career. And she's like, I am so passionate about this.
Well, and how it really started was I was talking about my son's night terrors, and she's like, have you ever done a sleep study? Does he breathe through his mouth? And I'm like, I've thought about doing a sleep study, but I know he has night terrors, right? And so she's like, oh man, I'm about to unlock a whole lot of things for you. And so let's kind of get into the breath and why it's so important that we even talk about this and think about this.
Pause, because I need to tell you that that's me. I'm so passionate that I will tell a stranger to do a sleep study on their child and tell them about all these things because, 5 minutes into our conversation.
Yeah. So the breath, why is it so important that we are even talking about this?
Yes. Okay. So what most people don't know is that the way we breathe impacts our entire body. It impacts every cell in our body, and it impacts how our bodies function. It directly influences the nervous system. It impacts the way that our face grows and develops. And then from there, we can have this big trickle-down effect of more dysfunctional breathing because our airway collapses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Brooke and I both read this book too, and we realized, okay, number one thing that we learned is we got to stop breathing out of our mouth. And so can you talk about why it's so important that we just breathe through our nose?
I guess, can we talk about what normal breathing looks like?
Yes, sure.
So that is what normal breathing is. Through our nose, quiet, slow. We should not be able to hear it. So that's what I mean by quiet. Our tongue should be up, resting up into the upper palate of our mouth. So your upper jaw. And our teeth should be slightly apart. Now that's somewhat controversial in my world. Some people think that our teeth should be touching and some people don't. The big piece is that your tongue should be up and you should be breathing through your nose with your lips closed. The reason that's important is because when all of those muscles are doing that proper posture when we're resting, so not talking, not eating, that should be our posture. That puts us in a position where all of the forces of those muscles are kind of in equilibrium. They're in balance. And so the structures of our face can grow properly.
I feel like so many people breathe through their mouth, right? You think about exercising, you think about sleeping. Mm-hmm. Like, why is it so important, the nose specifically?
Yes, well, that's how it was designed. Our mouth was designed for eating and talking. Our nose was designed for breathing. That's what it does. And smelling, of course. The piece about the nose is that it warms and humidifies. The structure of our nose is actually made to warm and humidify the air that's coming in, which is super special. It helps to sterilize the air, and then it helps to make a more efficient gas exchange through the lungs, in the blood, and then all of the cells that exchange the carbon dioxide and all of the different gases.
It's like a filter system
Yes.
of the crap that the toxins that we're breathing, all the bacteria.
The allergens and the dust and all of that stuff gets filtered. So it's perfectly right for our lungs to take in.
So when we're breathing through our mouth, all that shit's just going straight into the body.
Straight into the body. It's yucky. It makes it really hard on your lungs to do what it needs to do to get the gas to the right places so that your body can function properly.
Yeah. And something I found fascinating with the book, if you haven't read the book, if this is new information, Breath by James Nestor, we're going to reference it this whole podcast.
Yes.
We'll put it in the blog. Please get it. It's so fascinating. He talks about why, as a society, it's become like this, why we're breathing through our mouth. He talks about soft food and processed food and how our diet plays a huge part in it. Our ancestors way back when, they spent so much time of the day chewing.
Yes.
And now we don't. And so like our whole facial structures are different because of that.
They're saying like it's sunken in, our teeth are crooked, but back in the day, they didn't need braces because they were chewing their food and their face didn't sink in.
Right. For hours a day.
Yeah.
Hours. So that was kind of with that tongue up posture that I was talking about earlier. That's what helps create the facial structure that we want. We want the tongue up so that the palate, the top of your mouth, can grow out side to side, so right to left, and also forward. And the forward growth is what we're really, really missing in like our population today. We're getting a lot of collapsing upper jaws because the tongue is not resting up in the palate because we're mouth breathing.
So as a kid, are you born, I'm just thinking of evolution, like you're born breathing through your mouth, or is that something that like parents can teach their kids?
Both.
Both. Okay.
I see it almost every day in my practice, babies with their mouth open. We can talk a lot about what that could be caused by. There are multiple things that we might see with the oral structure that is causing it at that early stage. But it is teachable through certain kind of oral motor type of modalities, which is really cool. We can make huge changes in babies and young kids pretty quickly.
Yeah, and you have 3 kids, so are you teaching them like close your mouth, breathe through your nose?
Yes, constantly. We have lots of different sayings at our house. Every time we get on in front of a TV, we have to make sure that we either are focusing on our tongue or our breathing. They resist it sometimes, but they all do.
What do you tell them for the reason why that's important?
I don't know if I've really talked about it in depth with them. They know that their tongue needs to go up so that they can breathe through their nose, but we haven't talked about why.
Okay.
They're really little.
They are little.
Yeah.
Yeah, because your oldest is 7.
Right.
And then 7, 5, and 3?
3.
Yeah.
But like, let's start them young. Because as
Yes.
adults, like our mouth is basically formed.
Right.
Like right now it's helpful to put your tongue on top of your mouth so that you can breathe, but you're not changing how it's formed.
Not with just your tongue posture, but you can make a lot of changes with your tongue posture. And you could make a lot of changes through orthodontic work, which is really cool. There are some people in the airway community that are really good at helping adults like us who struggle with this. And I'm not saying you guys do, but I know I do, develop our structure so that we can have more optimal airways.
Yeah. I was fascinated too by all of the issues that can be healed through the breath, literally healing from the inside out. So can you speak to some of those of like, if someone's like, yeah, I get it, I breathe in through my mouth, it's bad, toxins, but like, what are some of the things that can actually be reversed through starting to breathe through your nose?
Snoring, sleep apnea, diabetes is one, other inflammation and autoimmune immune disorders. And with decreasing snoring and sleep apnea, you're decreasing risk of heart attack and stroke. You're decreasing your risk of anxiety and depression. You're decreasing your risk of
attention disorders,
GI things going on, attention deficits, a lot of things. In kids, you're talking about hyperactivity most of the time, chronic fatigue in adults.
So literally by closing your mouth, all of these things, you have less likely. I mean, in the book, it talks about so many different things where some of the physicians would be like, if you literally just shut your mouth,
Yes.
you will live 10 more years. You are shaving time off your life by breathing through your mouth.
Yes.
Which, you know, it might take you putting a reminder on your phone for a hot minute to like remember or prompt yourself to do this. But they did this study where these two men, James was one of them, and this other guy from like
Switzerland.
Switzerland. They did a study where they breathed only through their mouth for 10 days.
They plugged their nose.
They plugged their nose, put
Yuck.
stuff up their nose. And then another 10 days was through their nose. They breathed through their nose. And they felt like dog shit. After like day one of this breathing through their mouth, they were just talking about how low their energy was, how their sleep was crap, how they were irritable. And then they were taking all of their internal numbers too to see what was going on. And so it's super interesting in just like a day what it does to your health to be breathing through your mouth only.
Yes. Yeah, he had drastic increases in snoring. I think he said 4 minutes from the pre-test. He snored 4 minutes or something all night long. And the next night with his nose plugged, he snored for 4 hours, I think.
It was a crazy
and it
jump.
Continued to increase throughout that time. And with that, his blood pressure increased significantly up into the hypertension range. And then he had many apneas, I want to say. I don't remember what the details were, but and then when they switched back to their nose, it was in one day. All of those things basically disappeared, which is wild.
Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't sound like that'd be fun though to have something lodged up your
my
nose.
gosh.
I don't even know
Sounds
how
miserable.
for 10 days.
No, but read it and it will make you not want to go through what he went through. Yeah. And so you will start being mindful and breathing through your nose. I'm curious why you feel it's so hard for people to be conscious about that and start breathing through their nose.
Oh, that's a good question. I think that it is multifaceted. I think our culture has normalized mouth breathing. We have normalized snoring for sure. We think it's funny when our kids are snoring and cute, and we just think it's annoying when our husbands snore, right? The other piece is that our facial structure and all of the muscles of our face have changed, right? Because we've had our mouth hinged open, the muscles of our face don't work properly. It makes it harder to do the right movement, if that makes sense. That way, it's harder to think about. And if we're not aware that we're supposed to be thinking about it because our culture tells us we don't need to think about it, who cares about breathing? Then why would we think about it?
Yeah.
Well, that's why you're here. We're so happy you're here to talk about it because it is important. And we all, I don't want to say we all, but a lot of people have someone in their household that snores. And so if someone is snoring in your house, like what's the first thing you should do?
My recommendation would be to get a sleep study and ask for raw data, because a lot of the sleep clinics in our traditional medical world will put it through a computer basically, and the computer has numbers and thresholds, and this is what it leads to the diagnosis, right? So for instance, sleep apnea, the number and the criteria is very specific. You have to stop breathing for 10 seconds and have a spike or a drop in your blood or your blood oxygen level at the same time. But if you stop breathing for 9 seconds, that's not an apnea and it's not going to score, right? So you could stop breathing 100 times an hour for 9 seconds each, and you don't have sleep apnea technically. If that makes sense. I don't know.
So if you get the raw data, then what do you do with it?
Well, certain people would be able to help you comb through that data.
Like you.
Yes, maybe. Well, I could look at some of it. I'm thinking that there are certain facilities out there that are better equipped to read the raw data than others.
That's tricky though. It's like, you know, you think you could go in and trust, you know, these sleep studies. So it's tricky on to know where to go, like who to trust.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the division between traditional and functional medicine, right? When you go to a functional practitioner, they're going to look at your numbers just because quote unquote what's normal doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's healthy.
Yeah.
Like, what's the population that's getting tested?
Yeah.
Where are their numbers at? So for instance, like vitamin levels could be okay if you see a traditional doctor, but you see a functional doctor and they're like, no, that's really low. So there is a division there. Yeah, I'm curious too for people listening that are like, I can't afford that, or give me another option. Like, can I just tape my mouth shut? I'm curious.
I
your
would
thoughts on
not
that.
recommend it. No, I wouldn't recommend it until you get cleared that your airway is patent. If you can't breathe through your nose, your lifeline is your mouth. So no. I guess another great place to start, Andrea, to answer your question a little bit more, would be a myofunctional evaluation, because if you're mouth breathing or snoring or any of those kinds of things, you're having those symptoms, there's some sort of dysfunction and in the muscles of your face, and that has impacted the structure. So I always think of myself as like the team builder. So when people come to me, I spend a lot of time with them. I spend usually 90 minutes to 2 hours with them initially to really comb through their history, what's going on with them currently. But I'm able to kind of connect them with all the providers that I know are in the area, in the world of airway and functional orthodontics and all of that kind of stuff, because you can't just go knocking down your dentist door. Most people don't know. I would say that in the medical world, dentists and orthodontists are a lot quicker to take this information in than your typical medical providers. Not that they don't have good intentions. It's just that that's not what they're taught, I guess you could say.
Yeah. It's a very alternative medicine side of things. Like throughout the book, he talks about the yogi breath and pranayama, and in Chinese culture, there was the yin and the qi, this life force within your breath. And not only what you breathe in, but more so you breathing out. So let's get into that, because that was a big misconception for me. Was I thought breathing in oxygen was most important, but it's really how well your body can tolerate the carbon dioxide.
Yes. Well, I would say I'm not an expert on all the gases exchanged during breathing, but I do know is that most of us have been breathing so quickly and so fast that we do not tolerate enough carbon dioxide in our system. And carbon dioxide, what we've learned through this beautiful book, is actually the gas that helps oxygenate the cells. So it actually is necessary in order to adequately use oxygen in our body.
If you're taking in too much oxygen, it's not going anywhere.
Right. Yes. If you're breathing more oxygen. So he also mentioned the airport oxygen,
like masks.
Yeah. The little, you can go breathe oxygen or something, an oxygen bar, I think they call it. Well, that extra oxygen isn't going anywhere if you're not getting rid of the rest of the stuff that's in your body.
The stale air.
Yeah.
They talk about that. Yeah, I feel like it's super interesting. This book is like, breathe slower, breathe less, which is funny because you think like you should be breathing more often and faster. Because you're like, I should get my energy up. I should breathe in more. I should be breathing out of my mouth. And it's like, nope. And then I was reading about the hypoxic training, or the hypoventilation, which is super interesting for athletes. So it's basically like how you can train your body to more efficiently use the oxygen and the carbon dioxide in your body by holding your breath when you're working out.
Yes.
They were like, it could really help your performance. So I was like, I'm going to try this on my run today. But they did warn it's not pleasant at all. And it's not. I could only do it for like 2 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Well, they talked about that story of the man running a marathon in the desert, only his nose. And he used some specific breathing technique to be able to not drink water and run a marathon, for one. But if you're interested in breathing for athletes, you should definitely read The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McEwen. I never know how to say his last name, but he is British, and he has learned, he studied under Dr. Buteyko, who was also referenced in this book. He's British. I want to say he was a doctor, but he studied breathing, and he cured many people of many ailments. But one of the big things he's known to help cure or reduce symptoms of is asthma. And this Patrick McEwen has developed a technique to working with athletes. And so he works with like Olympic athletes and teaches them how to breathe so that they can be their very best.
Yeah.
when they're performing.
I think that's a great point to bring up. Asthma too, and it's prevalence, right? This book was saying it's the leading cause of ER visits, hospitalizations, and missed school days for children. And just thinking about that, it's like, wow, I had no idea that so many kids miss school because of this.
Right.
It's wild. And I don't know, if you think about that alone, children, which then eventually become adults, and just how important reading a book like this is, or learning more about what you're doing all day long and how it can directly impact your health. Like in this book, they were talking about all of these asthmatic patients getting completely cured by learning how to breathe less and slower and fully exhale. And so can we talk about that longer exhale, why that's important, what that creates to improve your health?
Yeah, I guess my understanding of it is that it's getting rid of all the stale air, and it's helping there's another piece of it is you're getting full diaphragmatic movement. And that's really huge for stimulating the vagus nerve. And that has been shown to calm our bodies, obviously, and regulate all of our internal organs, all of that stuff.
Yeah, because when we're in chronic fight or flight, we can't heal. The oxygen, the blood is going to the organs that are needed and our muscles to fight off the saber-toothed tiger or whatever. So you think about, especially with your GI and my gut health issues, it was like you have to trigger your vagus nerve to get in that calm, your rest and digest. And I talk to my clients all the time, like you need to be in your parasympathetic nervous system. And the breath is so simple and it's so overlooked. Like this is free, people.
Yes.
Like, and it's going to feel so good to just put on some headphones, sit in a quiet spot, 2 minutes. And we're going to get in later the exact breath work technique to use to help. And it's so flippin' simple.
Yeah. And I think
simple.
too, it's not just if you have GI issues. It's not just if you have asthma. You know, this is preventative medicine here. Yes. It's free. Like Brooke said, it's free, it's simple. And this is going to prevent all kinds of illnesses within your body. I think we just could overlook this. It's like breath, what? But it's so important. And, you know, as you get older, I've noticed with me, like having 3 little kids running around, my anxiety's up a little bit more than it ever has in my life. And, you know, as you get older, sometimes you run into depression or whatever type of mental health struggles people have. Like this is something everybody can tap into that is free. There's really no excuse not to just try this to see if it can make you feel better.
Absolutely. It is challenging for sure. I think most of us have a hard time sitting down and focusing on one thing, especially something as simple as breathing, but it's super important. And like Brooke said, it's 2 minutes, work in 2 minutes. And then you could work up to 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And like James did like 4 hours one day. I mean, that's wild to me, but it's simple. But it is hard because focusing on something like that is challenging, but it's only a couple minutes, and I would challenge everyone to try it.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I think people can overlook it too. Like it can't be that simple, right? Like you're going to tell me that I can heal my body by breathing. Like that was my whole thing. But once you learn what actually happens underneath the surface of the chemicals and the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, but also the vagus nerve, like the body is resilient and it's self-healing given the right conditions to do so. And so you're putting your body in that state where it can do it. So just give it a try. That's all I'll say.
So if you are one of those people who is not sure that they want to give this a try, I would say that thinking about the quality of your sleep is the next biggest piece of this airway puzzle. So when you're thinking about breathing through your nose through the day, that's fantastic, and it's going to do a lot to your body. But we need to be breathing through our nose at night too. And so some of the things that I think are super misunderstood when it comes to sleep and quality of sleep is frequent waking, especially the need to pee in the middle of the night. And that is something that James actually experienced in his little experiment that he did when he was mouth breathing versus nasal breathing. But he did talk about how when you're mouth breathing at night, you lose water in your body. And one of your glands in your body is supposed to create a hormone that tells all of your cells to hold water while you're sleeping. So you're not supposed to be able to wake up to the need to pee because your bladder is supposed to hold it. But what happens is when you're mouth breathing, you lose water, and that gland does not produce that same hormone. So your body naturally wants to release the water.
So you're saying if I breathe through my nose, I won't have to pee in the middle of the night.
I hope not.
Or less likely.
Right, less likely. And there's kind of a flip side to that from like my myofacial world is that a lot of people in the sleep science world, so sleep medicine, have taught us that it's usually a sudden deep breath. Like say you have an apnea or some resistance in your nasal airway, that you stop breathing and then you all of a sudden gasp. Mm-hmm. So your heart registers the sudden increase of pressure from your lungs as fluid. Mm. And so then it triggers your bladder to release.
Interesting.
Right.
Wild.
Yeah. So the kids who are wetting the bed past, anytime past their daytime potty trained for, a good amount of time, that's very likely an airway issue.
So interesting.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Attention disorders, wetting the bed. What other things are signs that maybe something could be going on with kids?
With kids, I would say hyperactivity is huge with the attention deficit. Behavior challenges, emotional regulation, kind of just like sensory processing in general.
Well, something I've talked about a few times, is my son's night terrors. And I think about, if he's having any behavioral issues the next day, it's like, of course he is. Although he doesn't remember it, like he's been up in the middle of the night. And so then his sleep is interrupted. And right now Mercury's in retrograde, I guess. And so last night he was in my room, and it's wild what happens to your next day. It throws everything off when you don't have sleep, right? So it's like, yes, it's an airway thing, and then it's sleep, and then it's your mental health, and it's just this cycle. And so it's like, if we can get this figured out through breathing, that's the answer. Like, I will take it.
It seems so simple, right? Well, and the other piece about with kids is like, think about how you and I, if we get woken up one time by our kids in the middle of the night, we are a disaster the next day. Mm-hmm. At least I am. I don't know about you.
Today. Yep.
So we need 5 cups of coffee just to get through till noon, right? We're crashing at 2 p.m. Probably because we had too much coffee, but also because we slept poorly. Our sleep was interrupted. We have coping mechanisms, right? We can drink coffee. We can go for a run. We can, fiddle around, and nobody's going to say anything. But our kids, poor little first and second graders, right? They're going to have the issue where they can't control it. They don't have those mechanisms to cope with all of that. They don't know what to do with their energy. Mm-hmm. And so they appear actually hyperactive because they are having a hard time controlling what's happening. They're like trying to keep themselves awake almost. Mm-hmm. That's how I think about it. Yeah. Whereas we're like, we need to drink our coffee to stay awake.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
Well, I think about it too as you age. So it's hard to be a kid and have to sit still, period.
Right. And
then have this on top of it. And then as you get older, like I think of myself like in high school, falling asleep at my desk sometimes. Like I'm just so tired because I didn't get a good night's sleep. And it's like, you get in so much trouble for these things, but it's like nobody wants to be the problem child. Nobody wants to fall asleep at your desk.
No one wants to be having a meltdown at school, or nobody wants to even really have a meltdown at home. It's just what's happening to their body and they can't control it. It's unfortunate. I guess one of my biggest goals professionally is to educate the general population, but I think especially the educators that we have in our schools who are amazing at what they do, but frequently the first conversation that they're having with families is, I think that they have ADHD versus how is your kid sleeping at night? And luckily some of our psychologists out there who are doing the diagnoses of these kids are starting to talk about sleep, but not enough. There's a lot of kids out there that are medicated, and 90% of them have an airway issue.
Well, and I watched my son last night fall asleep with his mouth open. So that's what's tricky is like, what do you do to get them to sleep with their mouth closed besides prompting them right before they go to sleep?
Yeah. Well, I always think about it. You have to habituate it during the day before you can do anything at night, because your body is out of your control at night, basically. I always train kids in small increments, So we start with 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and we just sit in our rest posture for that amount of time, getting focused more on the muscular piece of it versus the breathing necessarily. But then we do some breath work later on once they've got the rest posture established.
And is the rest posture you're talking about with the tongue?
Right, the tongue up, lips closed, healthy breathing through your nose. Aren't I so cute?
I'm curious for whoever's listening that's like, that sounds great, but I've got bad allergies. I literally cannot breathe through my nose. I have a deviated septum. Like, what do you say to those people?
Ooh.
How do we help them?
Mm-hmm. Those are the people that would benefit a lot from the Buteyko method. So there is actually free information, instructive videos on their website. It's the Buteyko Clinic. And they have actually one specific exercise. It's basically breath holds. When you increase your carbon dioxide, guess what? It can actually clear your nose. Now, I would say that doesn't work quite as well with people who have chronic congestion, right? But if it's just like your temporary allergies, your seasonal allergy kind of stuff, it works pretty well. You can do like 4 or 5 rounds of it and your nose is clear.
So what about the people that it is chronic?
When it's chronic, I would say that's just more complex, right? We have to be thinking about inflammation and the nervous system and allergens around us and trying to change the function, because form follows function. But it's just, there's usually a multidisciplinary team involved in that kind of situation. ENTs are usually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on kind of what's going on, why the congestion is there, I would say.
Because their pathways have to be cleared. So would that look like surgery? Like, what are some of those options?
So some people do have surgery. So they can have a rhinoplasty, which is kind of like a nose job, right? Turbinate reduction is something. So there's structures inside your nose. Those were the things that I was talking about that filter everything. So those kind of create these little pathways in your nose. You can get really big inflammation in there that causes more turbulence in your nose. Which can change how everything is filtered before it gets to your lungs. But yeah, there's lots of different things that the ENTs can do surgically. A lot will do steroid treatments first. So I don't know if that's super helpful. Most of the time it helps, but not significantly.
It's important though, I think, to not ignore it, right? Like to just be like, well, my nose just does this, or I can't, to actually look into someone that could help them.
Yeah, like down the road, what this could turn into. Like, it might not be a crazy issue now. You can deal with it now.
Right.
But down the road,
yeah.
Or compared to how you were a couple of years ago.
Right.
What's the quality of your life now?
Thinking about how people can find those practitioners. And I think Google search holistic dentist or airway dentist, and you're going to find someone that can help you and will know all the people in your world. Otherwise, of course, a myofunctional therapist will be able to guide you in finding the right people too. I always think it's just so unique depending on what circumstances. So for instance, some adults might need palate expansion significantly, and they might benefit from that from their congestion perspective. So they might not need to go the airway ENT route if they have their palate expanded.
It's different for everyone.
Yeah.
But 99% of people, or I'll say the majority of people, will benefit from breathing through their nose.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you absolutely cannot, then you need to seek medical profession. Right now.
Right now.
Yes. Everybody's different where they're at. But what we can all do is start to practice this, simplify how to breathe. And so how are we supposed to do this? Like, what is the way to start doing this in the proper, how do I say this? What's the proper way to get started with your breathing technique?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really easy way to start is to do like a 5-second count in, 5-second count out, really slowing down your inhale and your exhale. If you can do that for a few minutes, then I would start working towards what's called square breathing or box breathing. And that's where you have your inhale for, say 5 seconds is the number. We have 5-second inhale, 5-second breath hold, 5-second inhale or exhale, 5-second breath hold. So it's kind of 4 sides to the square and all sides are the same, but you're practicing making the square bigger. So next time you're going to do 6 seconds and then 7 seconds and 8 seconds. So you're practicing the carbon dioxide piece of it, right? But you're also slowing down your breath.
You know, in his book, he talks about how the 5.5 second inhale and exhale is like the perfect breath. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. But there's so many different breathwork techniques. I feel like the gist of it is the longer exhale, it stimulates your vagus nerve, which then gets you in that parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes, I believe so.
Is there anything else like that you feel like there's all these different techniques, what they help with?
I think they're all different in what they can allow your body to do. I think some of them stimulate the sympathetic response and some of them stimulate the parasympathetic. But I think really when it comes down to it, it's we are controlling that response versus that response being, I don't know, brought to our bodies with, you know, because there's no saber-toothed tiger that we're fighting, right? And so we can kind of control it. Whereas usually we used to think that we couldn't control it because it's autonomic.
Yeah. And in the back of the book, he has all different practices. Yes. He has like nostril breathing where you inhale with one nostril, close the other, and then switch. So there's a lot of different ones that you can find what works best for you and start there too.
Yeah, that one specifically is very interesting because he talks about how each side of your nose has a different response in your body, which is really cool to think about. But
I feel like we could talk about this book all day because there are so many studies in it. And I think, you know, you read all these studies, you read what they found, and it all comes down to slowing down, getting intentional with your breath, breathing in slow, breathing out slow. And so I feel like in general, if you're not taking time to sit down and even notice your breath, like I did this the other day and I realized I'm not even like belly breathing. I'm so shallow. It's up here in my chest. And when you take a second to like fix your posture, like your actual sitting posture, because we're all sitting all day long, and you start to breathe in and make sure your belly is coming out and you can count how long you're doing this, you realize how shallow your breaths are. And so I'm just thinking like, just in general, my mental health the last week from reading this book has drastically improved. Even my coach today, Kara, was like, there's a calm over you. And I'm like, I think it's because I'm breathing.
that's awesome.
You got some deep belly breathing. Yeah. I am total shallow breather, but something that's helped me and a client actually told me about it is visualizing as you inhale, chest, ribs, stomach. And that made such a difference.
Yeah.
So,
another thing that I always tell my clients is to lay on the floor and you have to feel your rib cage expand. So you can, when you're laying on the floor, you can feel your rib cage expand into the floor. And that means your diaphragm is moving. A lot of people don't breathe into the back of their lungs. They breathe into the front, right? So we are missing some of that piece. So getting full diaphragm movement is huge. So I like that strategy, thinking from up to down, and that really pushes you to, it sometimes can be uncomfortable if you're not used to it, really filling your lungs, and then emptying your lungs is also sometimes uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like, no wonder I feel like shit. I'm not giving my body any oxygen.
Right. Well, and with my kids at bedtime, you know, you can put an object on their belly and watch it rise and fall. And that way it's like a way for them to visually see like, oh, like I can really make this go up farther and then really far down, you know, just getting them mindful of it when they're young, I think is, because it's tough to like relearn this as adults. If they get this now when they're little.
Oh my gosh, they're golden.
Game changer.
They're golden. Yep. A little beanbag or a book, put it on their bellies and they can see that rise.
Yeah. And us as coaches too, and I'm sure you and your work talking about meditation, you know, getting mindful of your breath and those things, it sometimes sounds kind of woo-woo-y and people resist because they're like, I don't know how to do it. This is how you can start. Just counting in and counting out. Maybe it'll even just help you fall asleep.
Yes.
You know, we can focus on your mouth and your nose later, like focusing on just, you know, a lot of people struggle falling asleep. And so just starting this practice could really help the quality of your sleep or help you get to sleep sooner so you get more sleep before your kids wake you up 6 times because of retrograde.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Kerry. This has been awesome. We could talk about this topic forever. And this is just a very surface level dive into it because it is so complex. The key is to just start noticing breathing through your nose. Yes. And if you can't get some help, open those pathways.
Yep.
But if people want to know more, if they do need help, where can they find you?
Me, they can find me at elevatespeechtherapy.com. That's actually elevatestmn.com. My email is Kerry, Kerry, at elevatestmn.com.
Perfect.
And we'll plug that. We'll plug this book. We'll plug that other breathing technique that you'd mentioned. We'll plug that in our blog so people know where to find it. Because I think sometimes it's having something to reference and look at, or sometimes it's, it's so nuanced. People might just want to talk to you and be like, hey, who do you think I should talk to? Where should I go?
100%. I am all about the free consultation, guys. Call me and I will talk you through what's going on, answer your questions about it, that kind of stuff. You could tell me about your kids and your cousins and your dog. Your dog. Yeah. I love helping people find the right people for them.
Yeah, and what's nice is you have this way about you that doesn't make you feel stupid when you ask a weird question. Because I was like, wait, that has to do with breath? And she was like, yeah, it really does. And it's in this way. And I was like, oh, she really could have just told me I asked a really dumb question. But
no
so thank you.
Nope. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Well, Kerry, now it is time for your 3 gold stars.
Ooh, my first gold star is to read Breath by James Nestor.
Great gold star.
I love the Audible version because he reads it. But I do have to admit that I bought the hard copy after I read it because I wanted to be able to re-listen to or reread the breathing techniques at the end, which is really helpful. Number 2 is tongue up, lips closed, teeth apart, healthy breathing through your nose.
I'm going to use that with my kids.
I'm going to use it for myself.
My last one is just if you have a hard time breathing through your nose, get help. Find a myofunctional therapist at the very least to talk to or to get evaluated to see what all the different pieces to your puzzle are, because everyone's puzzle is different.
Mm-hmm. And I think, too, it's just like any other thing that you have to tie an importance to it of why to do it, because it is a hassle to reach out and find a specialist in those things. But this is your longevity of your life.
Yes.
This is chronic health conditions that you can avoid by figuring out how to breathe. And you're going to feel so much better and have so much more energy. Your body will work way more efficiently if you figure this out.
Yes. Migraines, headaches, all the things. Oh my gosh, we could go on forever.
So many. Well, good, because we have a couple more questions.
Okay. All right, good.
Unleashing Ivy. These are our rapid fire questions.
Right.
I'll let you take a sip of water.
I'm going to take a sip.
And then I will ask my question.
Shoot.
All right, Kerry. What is one thing that you were surprised that you noticed when you started breathing this way, being intentional about your breath?
How hard it is. I did not think that it would be so hard to hold my breath. I've tried the Buteyko method. Holding my breath after exhale is very challenging for me. I have to focus very hard on that.
Any symptoms wise that you noticed or resolved, or more energy, anything along those lines?
I would say I feel more calm for sure when I focus on it. I don't do it nearly as often as I need to, but yes, I would say when I take 5 minutes even. I did 7 days with my friend Maria, and we did a breathwork challenge, 5 minutes every day, and we texted each other when we were done. And it was awesome. We were both starting to feel kind of calm. And then, some shit hit the fan on day 7, and we were like, okay, fell off the wagon. But I would say calmness was that's hard to come by when you're a mom of 3.
Yeah, this isn't
Right,
my question.
I don't know.
This is not my Unleashing Ivy question.
Okay.
But how hard is it for you to sit next to someone who's breathing through their mouth, like in church, or like a family member that's not like your close relative breathing out of their mouth?
Yes. So there's an inside joke in my world about being in public, and it's really just that. Everywhere you go, you cannot unsee it. You just see it everywhere. And I can basically tell you if your tongue is in the right place from across the room.
Wow.
Interesting. I'm curious, again, not an Unleashing Ivy question, but what was the breath work technique that you used in those 7 days?
We just did the slow 5 in, 5 out. Well, that's what I did. I think she just did the slow as well. I don't know what her count was. Okay. We're maybe at different levels, but I did the 5 in, 5 out.
Okay. I'm going to do it.
I
Hold me
sometimes
accountable.
use it on my watch. There's a
Oh, yeah.
There's lots of breathing apps too. So.
It's like, bitch, you ain't breathing, breathe.
Yep. It is.
And then I'm like, you're right, I'm not.
My phone will say, oh, whoa, that was a lot. Let's breathe it out. Thanks.
It knows the blood pressure. Okay.
My question is, I know how passionate you are about what you do and that you are on a mission for a lot of things and that you love what you do. And so what's your favorite part? What's your favorite part about what you do? And like, what is your biggest mission with what you do?
I would definitely say my favorite part of my day-to-day is doing evaluations with new clients because I love, one, either being the person that can relate with them, two, being the person that finally understands what they're going through and validates them, because most of the time they've come from the traditional medical world where they are told, well, you're a young, fit woman and you don't have apnea, so take some antidepressants and you're fine. Educating the public is my huge passion. Someday I'll have more of a voice. I'll be able to, I don't know. I think someday I'd love to develop a system of implementing airway screens at schools while they're doing hearing and vision. I would love for them to screen for breathing and all of this kind of stuff. Sleep and breathing would be really great. If you're interested in looking online, there's something called the Fairest 6. And that is a screening tool actually for children to screen for sleep disorder breathing. It was developed after like 6 years of research in the medical world, which is fantastic. So it's out there. There's opportunity, but it's just not mainstream yet. So, and it's not mandated by the government to screen kids. So it's a hurdle. So we'll get there eventually, I think.
Yeah. Well, this book is saying too, like, a lot of these studies, they just disappear or like they're not, they're not listened to by the medical world for some reason, even though there's scientific studies that are showing, like, proving the health benefits. It's so interesting why it's dismissed.
You can see the differences in the skulls, for instance, and you can see that it times exactly with the Industrial Revolution. It's wild, but I think that that's multifaceted as well. And I think that politics plays a big role in that. Big pharma, all the stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hopeful that we'll get there. And I think about my journey the last 5 years, like holistic health has become way more mainstream. And I'm hoping that this will follow.
Yes.
It's got to.
Yep.
Okay. Last question. What is one thing you wish you would have known sooner?
Really, I wish I would have known more about breathing. I wish I would have known more about the nervous system. And I wish I would have known more about like orofacial development. I wish I would have known all of this stuff when I was first practicing. I think back to all the kids that I missed that were probably coming in mouth breathing and all of that stuff that we don't know.
When you were doing like speech therapy with kids?
Yeah, exactly. And how much of this probably had to do with their nervous systems and mouth breathing, the way they breathe and the way they sleep.
Yeah.
Well, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah. Well, thank you for digging into it now. I think, we have these shoulda, coulda, wouldas, but you're, on our platform talking about how important it is to catch. And, we have a ton of females that listen that are moms or that are going to be moms or have grandchildren that can kind of go to that population and say, whoa, they're 4 and they're snoring. Like, let's do something about it. So
they know a kid or a parent. Even if we all do. Right.
Yes. Yeah. And I just think even just saying it's not normal to snore literally is mind blowing to people. It's like, what? It isn't?
Yeah.
And so thank you for being here and just normalizing that we need to focus on the simplest thing to change our lives and our health and our future and all of that. We appreciate you joining us in studio.
Thank you so much. I love it.
Yeah.
And now for your piece of gold, would you like to share your gold with us?
Guess where it's from?
James Nestor.
It is. No matter what you eat, how much you exercise, how skinny or young or wise you are, none of it matters if you're not breathing properly. James Nestor.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.